The Vrexian throne room was designed to intimidate. Black stone walls stretched endlessly upward, glowing red fissures pulsed like veins in the structure, and the air was thick with the metallic scent of war. At the center of it all, seated on a massive, obsidian throne, was Queen Xyzara the Unyielding, a 10-foot-tall, armor-clad apex predator with talon-like fingers drumming impatiently on the armrest. Across from her stood the human diplomatic delegation, led by Ambassador Reynolds, who was doing his best to not visibly sweat. Standing slightly behind him was Dr. Jake Carter, a xenobiologist who was absolutely not taking this seriously enough. "State your terms." Xyzara's voice was a low growl, reverberating through the chamber. "But be warned, should your words bore me, I may choose to devour one of you instead." Jake whispered to Reynolds. "Is that an actual threat or, like, a power move? Because honestly, both are kinda hot." Reynolds elbowed him hard. The ambassador cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, we come seeking peace between our species. Our worlds have much to gain from cooperation." Xyzara raised a clawed hand, silencing him. She leaned forward, her golden eyes narrowing. "Humans, frail, squishy, pathetic creatures. What value do you bring to the galaxy?" Jake, ever the scientist, muttered. "Well, for starters, we have coffee, sarcasm, and tax fraud." Xyzara's glare snapped to him instantly. "And who is this insignificant one?" Reynolds let out a silent prayer to the universe before answering. "This is Dr. Jake Carter. He's here to observe," Jake interrupted, grinning. "You know, for science. Your Majesty, did you know Vrexian bone density is nearly 4 times that of humans? Fascinating. You must have an insane pain tolerance." Xyzara did not seem impressed. "Your knowledge is meaningless. Your presence is tolerated only because I wish it." Jake's grin widened. "Ah. So you do like me." A low, dangerous growl rumbled from the Queen's throat. "Do not test my patience, human. And above all else," she lifted one razor-sharp finger and pointed directly at him, "do not touch me. You will regret it." Jake blinked. "Okay, but now you're making it sound like a challenge." Before anyone could stop him, he shifted his weight slightly and accidentally brushed the side of her arm while adjusting his hollow tablet. The room froze. Xyzara gasped. Not a snarl, not a roar of fury, an actual, sharp intake of breath, like someone had just shocked her system. Her entire body went rigid. Then, a tiny, barely suppressed, high-pitched giggle slipped out. Jake blinked. Reynolds' soul left his body. The Vrexian royal guards visibly flinched. For the first time in recorded galactic history, Queen Xyzara, the warlord, the conqueror, the terrifying force of nature, had squeaked. Jake's brain short-circuited for a moment before rebooting. "Wait, was that a?" Xyzara snapped upright, her armor clanking loudly. Her expression flickered between murderous rage and sheer mortification. "Silence." The word was lethal, but her voice was slightly off. Jake took a step back, hands up. Whoa. Your Majesty, no offense, but did you just giggle? I did no such thing." "Oh, no, that was definitely a giggle." Jake's face lit up like a kid who just found out the school cafeteria started serving pizza every day. "Oh my God, you're ticklish, aren't you?" The Queen's eyes burned with murderous fury. "I will annihilate you." Jake pointed at her like he just uncovered the secret to faster-than-light travel. "That reaction says yes." Reynolds grabbed Jake's arm, yanking him backward. "For the love of everything holy, shut up before she rips out your spine." One of the Vrexian generals stepped forward cautiously. His expression was one of pure horror. "Your Majesty, what are your orders?" Jake's curiosity overpowered his survival instincts. "Wait, hold up, do your people not know that you're ticklish?" Xyzara's face twitched. "Holy crap. They don't? Oh, this is gold." The Queen's entire posture stiffened. "Human. If you value your miserable existence, you will never speak of this again." Jake, in full scientist mode now, was fascinated. No, see, that's exactly why I have to. This is a scientific breakthrough. What if this is an evolutionary trait? Maybe your species. A snarl ripped from her throat. If you say one more word. I mean, statistically, if one Vrection is ticklish, that probably means more of you are, right? The Queen's eye twitched so hard, it looked like she was buffering. Jake grinned like a maniac. I bet your enemies would love to know that. The entire Vrection War Council gasped. The Queen's claws flexed dangerously. You would not dare. Jake tilted his head. Oh, but I totally would. Reynolds whispered to him, voice shaking. Jake, you absolute lunatic, stop pushing the 10-foot war goddess. Jake ignored him. Look, I'm not saying I'd sell your secret for, like, free drinks at an intergalactic bar, but I'm also not saying that. The Queen stood so fast, her throne groaned in protest. Enough. The room fell dead silent. XY Zara loomed over Jake, her burning golden gaze locked onto him. Her voice was slow, deliberate, deadly. You wish to test this theory, human? Jake blinked. Wait, what? A predatory grin spread across her face. Very well. Let us see if you find this amusing when you are begging for mercy. Jake swallowed hard. That sounds vaguely terrifying. And also, weirdly attractive? Reynolds let out a long, pained sigh. I swear to God, if humanity gets annihilated because you have a thing for scary alien women, I'm going to haunt you in the afterlife. Jake's brain was working overtime trying to figure out if he had just won or doomed all of humanity. Queen XY Zara loomed over him, her imposing frame casting a shadow that felt like it should come with its own death toll. So, Jake said, keeping his voice light and totally not nervous. When you say test this theory, you don't mean, like, in a gently confirm your reaction for science way, do you? The Queen bared her razor-sharp fangs in what was technically a smile, but felt a lot more like a warning label. No, human. I do not. Reynolds subtly moved 3 steps away from Jake. Yeah, you're on your own, buddy. Jake let out a nervous chuckle. So, what's the Vrection equivalent of a safe word? Asking for a friend. XY Zara leaned in, her golden eyes gleaming. There is none. The royal guards tensed, their expressions a mixture of confusion and barely concealed horror. No one had ever seen their queen react this way to anything. Normally, her enemies were reduced to ash and regret. But now she was entertaining this human's nonsense. XY Zara cracked her neck, flexing her claws. If you are so eager to test my tolerance, then let us see how long you last under my hand. Jake raised a finger. Okay, but just for clarification, when you say under your hand, do you mean in a diplomatic demonstration kind of way or in a screaming in pain kind of way? XY Zara smirked. We shall see. Jake had several regrets. The guards formed a tight semicircle around the room, waiting to witness the carnage. The Vrection generals looked deeply unsettled, as if they were about to see something they could never unsee. XY Zara raised her clawed hand and slowly reached toward Jake. He braced himself for pain, agony, possibly death. Then she poked his ribs. Jake snorted. XY Zara froze. The guards blinked. The generals blinked harder. Jake looked down at her hand. Wait. Was that supposed to hurt? XY Zara's eyes narrowed. I was assessing your weakness. Jake raised an eyebrow. Sure. Look, I don't want to alarm you, but that felt less like assessing my weakness and more like mild flirting. The Queen's tail twitched violently. You think I would waste my time flirting with a soft-bodied, weak-boned creature like you? Jake shrugged. I mean, if you're into the whole fragile, squishy scientist thing, you could have just asked me to dinner. A deep, menacing growl rumbled from the Queen's throat. You are either insufferably brave or unbelievably stupid. Jake grinned. Oh, sweetheart, why not both? Reynolds covered his entire face with his hands. I hate this. I hate this so much. XY Zara's eye twitched. Without another word, she jabbed her claws into Jake's side. Jake yelped and jumped backward, laughing involuntarily. XY Zara's expression flickered, just for a second, from rage to shock. Jake gasped. Oh my God! You were trying to tickle me! Were you just trying to? Are you trying to get revenge? XY Zara hissed. I am attempting to break your resolve. Jake grinned wider. Oh no, babe. If we're going down that road, you should know, I have 4 siblings. I was forged in the fires of merciless tickle wars. You're in my domain now. The Queen's tail lashed violently. I do not fear you, human. Jake cracked his knuckles. You should. And then, in one fluid, reckless motion, he lunged. For the first time in her reign, Queen XY Zara dodged. The entire throne room gasped. Jake missed completely, stumbled forward, and landed face first against the Queen's armored chest plate. A silence fell so heavy it had physical weight. Jake looked up slowly. Okay. This is a lot of metal and muscle. You work out? XY Zara's face was unreadable. Remove yourself from my person, human. Jake patted her armor. Counteroffer, no. The Queen let out a deep, slow breath, like someone trying very hard to suppress either laughter or homicide. The Vrexian generals looked seconds away from a stroke. Jake smirked. Sir, how mad would you be if I did this? And then he squeezed her side. XY Zara shrieked. It wasn't a dignified royal warlord shriek. It wasn't even an angry shriek. It was a full-blown, high-pitched, undignified giggle scream. The Queen of the Vrexian Empire, feared across the galaxy, tried to slap a hand over her mouth but failed spectacularly. The throne room erupted into chaos. One general collapsed on the spot. A guard dropped his spear, his hands trembling. Reynolds let out the world's longest, slowest exhale. Jake, still grinning like an idiot, took a step back. Well. How the turntables? XY Zara's chest heaved, her entire body rigid with barely restrained fury and sheer, primal embarrassment. You, she hissed, voice low and deadly. Are dead. Jake held up his hands. Now, let's not be hasty. The Queen lunged. Jake bolted. Reynolds, seeing his chance, ran in the opposite direction. You brought this on yourself, you absolute menace! The throne room descended into absolute pandemonium as the Queen of the Vrexian Empire chased a human scientist through the halls of her own palace, threatening murder, annihilation, and possibly marriage in that exact order. Jake, laughing between gasping breaths, shouted over his shoulder. You know, if you really wanted to catch me, you'd have to. He yanked a flagpole off the wall, spun it around, and poked her ribs with it. XY Zara squealed. Jake dropped the flagpole and ran faster. One of the generals clutched his chest. I cannot process this reality. A nearby royal advisor stared at the carnage, then slowly pulled out a flask. I need a raise. The Queen roared in frustration. You cannot escape me, human! Jake, still sprinting for dear life, yelled back. Okay, but real talk, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you hate that you're kinda enjoying this? XY Zara screamed in fury. Jake grinned. Reynolds, from somewhere far, far away, muttered, Humanity is doomed. And somehow, Jake was absolutely fine with that. Jake kept running. Not because he had an actual escape plan, but because running from a furious alien warlord felt like a solid survival instinct. Unfortunately, XY Zara was faster. Every hallway in the palace echoed with the sounds of stomping boots, furious growling, and human laughter that really wasn't helping the situation. Reynolds, who had wisely hidden behind a statue, peered out just long enough to yell, You're an idiot, Jake! Jake, dodging a swipe from the Queen's claws, shouted back. And yet I'm the one still breathing! XY Zara slashed at the air just behind him, her claws missing by inches. Not for long, human! Jake vaulted over a low railing, landing on what he assumed was a decorative fountain. It was not. It was a royal ceremonial water basin, which he realized about 2 seconds too late as he crashed through the sacred purification waters of the Vrexian Empire. The gathered nobles gasped in horror. Jake popped up spluttering, drenched, and marginally concerned about whatever sacred laws he just shattered. "Okay," he said, slicking his hair back. "Before anyone freaks out." XY Zara leaped over the railing with a predatory grin, landing in the water with a resounding splash. Jake blinked. "Oh. Okay. So we're just disrespecting sacred traditions together now? That's cool. That's fine. I love what we're building here." The nobles were too stunned to react. One elder, whose face had lost all color, muttered, "Unbelievable." A nearby scholar clutched his notes, whispering, "This is unprecedented." A priest fainted. Jake waded back toward dry ground, but XY Zara lunged, tackling him straight back into the water. There was a brief moment of silence before Jake surfaced again, gasping. He blinked the water out of his eyes. "Did you just drown me in front of your own people?" XY Zara's tail flicked. "A regrettable miscalculation." Jake wiped his face. "Right. Totally accidental attempted murder. I get it. Happens all the time in intergalactic diplomacy." XY Zara exhaled through her teeth, clearly struggling to regain her dignity. "Human. You will cease this nonsense." Jake stretched his arms out. "Oh, I'm the one causing nonsense? I wasn't the one who just tackled an unarmed scientist into your own sacred water temple." She narrowed her eyes. "You provoked me." Jake smirked. "Well, yeah? It was funny." One of the priests, who had recovered from fainting, sputtered angrily. "Your Majesty! He has defiled the sanctity of the—" XY Zara held up a hand. "Enough." The priest immediately shut up. Jake raised an eyebrow. "Wow. Just like that, huh? No cosmic punishment? No sacrificial consequences? What, is this more of a lightly frowned upon sacred space?" XY Zara's jaw tightened. "The ritual basin is meant to cleanse warriors before battle. It is not intended for childish human antics." Jake, still soaking wet, grinned. "Counterpoint, I feel extremely cleansed right now." XY Zara's tail twitched violently. A nearby noble coughed into his hand. "Technically, since both of you entered the waters together, it does complete the purification rites." Jake looked over. "Wait. What does that mean?" The noble hesitated, clearly aware he was stepping into dangerous territory. In Vexian tradition, warriors who complete purification together are bonded in combat." Jake blinked. "I'm sorry. What?" Reynolds, still hiding behind a pillar, muffled a strangled wheeze. XY Zara's claws tightened. "He speaks out of turn." The noble immediately took 2 steps back. "Of course, Your Majesty." Jake grinned wider. "Wow. So, let me get this straight, we're bonded now?" XY Zara's eye twitched. "We are not." Jake held a hand to his chest. "But the sacred water says otherwise." XY Zara growled. Reynolds, barely holding in laughter, whispered, "Jake, I swear to God, if you get yourself declared as her royal consort, I am leaving you here." Jake perked up. "Wait, that's an option?" XY Zara's snarl was immediate. "Do not finish that sentence, human." Jake held up his hands, mock innocence dripping from his face. Hey, I'm just saying. We should be open-minded about where this interspecies cultural exchange is heading." XY Zara lunged forward again, and this time, Jake didn't run. Instead, he raised a single finger and gently poked her ribs. The instant reaction was glorious. XY Zara jumped back, letting out a sharp, surprised yelp. The entire hall fell into silence. A general dropped his weapon. A diplomat stared like he had witnessed the birth of a new universe. Jake, standing there like a man with a death wish, grinned. "Oh, babe, I am so in your head now." XY Zara was frozen. Not out of fear, not out of hesitation, but pure, unfiltered rage. Jake tilted his head. "So we gonna pretend that didn't just happen? Or are you gonna admit that I have officially discovered the galaxy's most powerful diplomatic leverage?" XY Zara's breathing was sharp and slow, like she was mentally restraining herself from committing a war crime. Jake casually stretched. "You know, if I wanted to, I could end every single one of your political negotiations with a well-timed poke. XY Zara took a deliberate step forward. Jake took a deliberate step back. XY Zara smiled, a slow, terrifying thing. You are under the impression that you hold power here. Jake mimicked her tone. You are under the impression that I won't do it again. Another silence. Reynolds, from his hiding spot, whispered a prayer. Then, before anyone could stop him, Jake reached forward and poked her again. XY Zara yelped. Jake bolted. Reynolds choked on his own breath. XY Zara roared in fury, claws slicing through the air as she gave chase once more. The noble from earlier, still struggling to process the absolute insanity happening before his eyes, muttered, I am going to need a very large drink. The priest, clutching his heart, nodded weakly. Same. As Jake sprinted for his life, dodging angry Vrexian guards and priceless artifacts, he couldn't help but laugh. This was possibly the best day of his life. Jake had never been in a war council meeting before, and after today, he was fairly certain he was going to be banned from all future ones. The massive chamber was filled with Vrexian generals, noble advisors, and other high-ranking officials, all of whom had clearly spent their lives not dealing with human nonsense. And yet, here they were, dealing with human nonsense. XY Zara sat at the head of the table, arms crossed, tail flicking, expression unreadable. Jake sat at the very, very opposite end, mostly because nobody wanted to sit next to him. Reynolds, standing behind him, whispered, I'm actually amazed you're still alive. Jake smirked. What can I say? I'm very charming. Reynolds stared at him. You weaponized tickling against an intergalactic warlord. Jake shrugged. And I'm still breathing. That says something. Before Reynolds could respond, a general stood up, clearing his throat. Your Majesty, the Council convenes today to discuss the recent incident. XY Zara's eyes snapped to Jake. Yes. Let's. Jake beamed. You're talking about me in official political settings now? I feel so special. A dead silence. The general continued, ignoring him. The human's actions. Jake raised a hand. Oh, I have a name, you know. The general's eye twitched. The human's actions. Jake. The general gritted his teeth. The human. Jake. A sharp claw scraped against the table. The general inhaled deeply through his nose. Jake's actions have thrown the Empire into a state of uncertainty. Jake put a hand on his chest. Uncertainty? I'd like to think I've introduced some much-needed fun. XY Zara slammed her hands on the table. The entire council flinched. She leaned forward slowly, voice dangerously calm. You have humiliated me. Jake thought for a moment. I wouldn't say humiliated. That feels strong. Maybe something softer, like mildly inconvenienced. The tension in the room became unbearable. Reynolds whispered, panicked. Jake, I am begging you, stop talking. Jake, predictably, did not stop talking. Look, he continued, resting his chin in his hand. If you really think about it, this is actually a huge diplomatic breakthrough. A different general, clearly regretting his entire career, said. How? Jake spread his hands. Mutually assured tickling. Silence. The noble from before rubbed his temples. I beg your pardon? Jake grinned. It's like mutually assured destruction, but less nuclear war, more laughter. XY Zara's claws dug into the table. You think this is a joke? Jake nodded. Oh, absolutely. But that doesn't mean it's not useful. The council shifted uncomfortably. One advisor, trying very hard to pretend this was a normal political meeting, said, You're implying you wish to use this as a strategic tool? Jake leaned back. Think about it. You guys are feared across the galaxy. Nobody dares to challenge you. But now, everyone knows you have a weakness. XY Zara's tail lashed violently. Jake ignored it. That means, he continued, your enemies will start rethinking their tactics. Instead of full-scale war, they might try new diplomatic approaches. Less bloodshed. More negotiations. A pause. The council exchanged looks. It's not the worst point I've ever heard, one general admitted reluctantly. Another noble, still clearly disturbed, muttered. But it's also insane. Jake pointed at him. Insane yet effective. XY Zara stood abruptly. Enough of this. Everyone snapped to attention. She stalked toward Jake, stopping just inches from his chair. You think you've won something here? Jake smiled up at her. I think we've both won something here. XY Zara's claws grazed his chair. You have made a fool of me. You have turned my own body against me. And worst of all, you enjoyed it. Jake did not deny it. XY Zara narrowed her eyes. I should kill you. Jake nodded. But you won't. Silence. The council held their breath. XY Zara exhaled slowly. Then, to everyone's shock, she smiled. Not in a nice way. In a terrifying way. Jake's confidence wavered. What's that look for? XY Zara leaned down. You think you have discovered my weakness? Jake swallowed. Yes? XY Zara's tail curled around his chair. But you underestimate my patience. Jake did not like where this was going. XY Zara straightened, addressing the council. The human has provided great amusement. A confused pause. XY Zara continued smoothly. It would be a shame to waste such a unique diplomatic resource. Jake blinked. Wait. What? She turned back to him, grinning. You, human, have volunteered yourself for a new position. Jake did not recall volunteering for anything. XY Zara placed a firm hand on his shoulder. Effective immediately, you are now the official royal jester of the Vrexian Empire. Jake's brain short-circuited. Reynolds choked. The council stared in stunned horror. Jake gawked. Wait. What? XY Zara smirked. You wish for diplomacy. You have it. Jake gestured wildly. But, jester? XY Zara tilted her head. Would you prefer official tickle weapon? Jake shut up immediately. Reynolds wheezed laughed behind him. Dude! You just got promoted. Jake buried his face in his hands. XY Zara leaned down once more, voice dangerously amused. And if you ever try that again... Jake looked up. XY Zara whispered. I will find out if humans have weaknesses too. Jake froze. XY Zara grinned. Dismissed. Jake, for the first time all day, had no words. The council watched in complete disbelief as their great and mighty queen walked out of the chamber with a victorious flick of her tail. Reynolds, still laughing, slapped Jake on the back. Congratulations, buddy. You just became an intergalactic meme. Jake groaned into his hands. I hate everything. Reynolds grinned. Nah. You love it. Jake muttered. I'm gonna die here. The noble from before, still clutching his temples, sighed deeply. We all are. Jake sat on a massive, throne-like chair, one he was very sure was supposed to be ceremonial and not actually occupied. And yet, here he was. The grand hall of the Vrexian court was filled with nobles, all whispering in hushed, scandalized tones as they stared at him. Jake sighed, rubbing his temples. I want it on record that I did not agree to this. Reynolds, standing beside him, grinning like an idiot, said, I mean, technically you didn't say no. Jake shot him a look. I was too busy panicking. Reynolds nodded. And now you're the royal jester. Jake groaned. This is not a thing that should exist. A trumpet-like instrument blared suddenly, and the crowd fell silent as XY Zara entered. Jake straightened nervously. She approached with an air of absolute confidence, her armored robes flowing dramatically behind her. Jake, in contrast, was wearing a Vrexian ceremonial robe that was both far too grand and incredibly uncomfortable. XY Zara sat on her throne, regarding him with a smirk. Jake squinted. Are you enjoying this? She tilted her head. Immensely. Jake sighed. Yeah. Figured. A noble stepped forward, clearing his throat. Your Majesty, the Council requests clarification on the human's position. Jake perked up. Yes, please. Me too. The noble ignored him. You have assigned him the title of Royal Jester, but... Jake leaned forward. Wait. So this is actually a real position? XY Zara's tail flicked. It is now. Jake exhaled deeply. Oh, fantastic. That's just great. The noble looked pained. But Majesty, a human in the royal court. XY Zara held up a hand. He is not just any human. Jake sat up a little. Oh? Do go on. She smirked. He is the only human to best me in battle. The entire hall gasped. Jake blinked. I wouldn't call it a battle. XY Zara gestured dismissively. Semantics. The noble visibly struggled to process this information. Your Majesty, surely you don't mean to imply. XY Zara grinned. That he is a force to be reckoned with? Absolutely. Jake turned to Reynolds. I think she just called me dangerous. Reynolds laughed. No, she called you a weapon. Jake was unsure how to feel about this. XY Zara continued smoothly. From this day forward, the human known as Jake shall serve as the Empire's official ambassador of amusement. Jake choked. Wait. What? The nobles erupted into protests. An ambassador? To what, exactly? This is an insult to our great court. Jake turned to XY Zara, gesturing wildly. You're making me a diplomat now? XY Zara's eyes gleamed. I am making you a symbol. Jake narrowed his eyes. Of what, exactly? XY Zara leaned forward, voice mockingly sweet. Of the potential consequences of underestimating humans. Jake stared. Reynolds whistled. Damn. That's actually kinda brilliant. Jake groaned. You're enjoying this too much. XY Zara sat back, clearly pleased with herself. The nobles grumbled amongst themselves. One brave soul finally asked, hesitant. What, exactly are his duties? XY Zara tilted her head thoughtfully. Jake held up a hand. Yes, I would also like to know that. XY Zara's tail curled in amusement. To keep the court entertained. Jake squinted. Define entertained. XY Zara smirked. Surprise me. Jake pointed at her. That's dangerous. XY Zara's grin widened. I know. Reynolds laughed. Oh, you're so screwed. Jake buried his face in his hands. I hate everything. Jake's first official diplomatic duty came faster than expected. A delegation from the ZYYTH Alliance, one of the Vrexian Empire's more aggressive rivals, had arrived for tense negotiations. Jake, against all logic, was required to be present. Reynolds whispered, Okay, whatever you do, just be professional. Jake sighed. That's gonna be very difficult. Reynolds nodded solemnly. I know. The ZYYTH diplomats entered, a group of tall, insected aliens with razor-sharp mandibles and an air of supreme arrogance. Their leader, Ambassador Kairwylel, glared at Jake. What is this creature doing here? Jake grinned. Oh, don't mind me. I'm just the court jester/diplomatic nightmare. Kairwylel's mandibles clicked in irritation. Is this a joke to you? Jake nodded. I mean, kind of. A long silence. XY Zara finally spoke, calm and authoritative. The human is here as a reminder. Kairwylel's eyes narrowed. A reminder of what? XY Zara smirked. That no empire is invincible. The room went still. Jake blinked. Oh. That's actually kinda badass. Kairwylel scoffed. Your Majesty, this is an insult. A weak, pathetic creature. XY Zara raised a brow. Weak? Pathetic? She turned to Jake. Would you care to demonstrate? Jake's eyes widened. Wait, what? XY Zara grinned. You bested me once. Let's see how the ZYYTH fare. Jake pointed at her. You set me up. She smirked. Obviously. Kairwylel snorted. You expect me to fear this soft little thing? Jake sighed. Man, you guys never learn. KRYL took a step closer, looming over him. Jake looked at XY Zara. So, just to be clear, if I accidentally start an intergalactic war, that's on you, right? XY Zara's tail flicked. Consider it a test. Jake sighed deeply. Then, with zero hesitation, he reached out and lightly poked KRYL's side. A horrible chittering noise erupted as KRYL jerked back violently, knocking over 2 guards in the process. Jake's eyes lit up. Oh my God! Reynolds stared. No way. KRYL shook with rage. How dare you! Jake's grin turned predatory. Oh, buddy, he whispered, stepping forward. You messed up. KRYL took a nervous step back. Jake lunged. And that's how, once again, a major diplomatic event turned into an absolute disaster. As an entire alien delegation collapsed into an undignified, writhing heap. And humanity's reputation for chaos and unpredictability was forever cemented in galactic history. XY Zara, watching the chaos unfold, let out a low, satisfied chuckle. Magnificent.